So, having done all this, I've learned I really don't give a shit about Donald Trump. I care about what he does and what the Republicans allow him to do. But since I did the research on that, let's talk about it. What we're going to talk about today is the history of Trump's contacts with Russia leading up to the year 2000. Of course, this is all just the publicly known contacts with Russia. There's really no way to know what other contacts he may or may not have had with Russia. So, avoiding the pointless speculation, let's get to the point. So, his first tie with Russia would be his first wife, Ivana. She was a Czechoslovakian citizen. At the time, Czechoslovakia was under Russian control. According to Vladimir Mylov, a former deputy Ministry of Energy of the Russian Federation, I think that the security services had some influence on him, or at least established the channels for obtaining information about him through Ivana. I think that in the 90s, KGB/FSB continued to collect a dossier on him simply to keep the momentum. Most likely, it contains a lot of interesting information, both financial and personal, as Trump loved girls very much. He liked to grab them in every possible way, etc. He didn't restrain himself in the 80s and 90s. He really went for it when it came to Russia to discuss deals or hold beauty contests. Given the long-term observation since 1987, I have little doubt that they have evidence that can strongly compromise him in such a conservative country as America. He's not even sure whether these records exist. I think he's waking up sweating like a dog thinking, oh my god, did they record this? According to files in Prague, declassified in 2016, Czech spies kept a close eye on the couple in Manhattan. They opened letters sent home by Ivana to her father Milos, an engineer. Milos was never an agent or an asset, but he had a functional relationship with the Czech secret police, who would ask him how his daughter was doing abroad, and in return, permit her visits home. There is periodic surveillance of the Trump family in the United States, and when Ivana and Donald Trump Jr. visited Milos in the Czechoslovakian Socialist Republic, there was further spying. Like with other Eastern Bloc agencies, the Czechs would have shared their intelligence product with their counterpart in Moscow, the KGB. Trump may have been of interest for several reasons. 1. His wife came from Eastern Europe. 2. At a time after 1984, when the Kremlin was experimenting with the Communist Party reform, Trump had a prominent profile as a real estate developer and tycoon. According to Czech files, Ivana's mentioned her husband's growing interest in politics. So, there were two stories for how Trump initially got involved with the Russians. In 1985, the Russians were trying to ramp up recruitment for agents. Khrushchev, chairman of the KGB, was complaining about the lack of results in recruiting agents from Americans. In 1986, Yuri Dubinin arrived in New York, while his daughter and her family were already here. While he wasn't subordinate to the KGB, he was in a role of great trust, being the ambassador to the United States. So, he would have been interested in making the KGB happy. So, when he arrives in New York, his daughter took him on a tour, and one of the first buildings they saw was Trump Tower. And he said he wanted to see Trump. They went in and met Trump and complimented him on his tower. After charming Trump, he later referred him to the Intourist, a travel agency that was run by the KGB. They were required to give permission before tourists went to Russia. The other story for how it happened goes as follows. The courtship began in 1986, when Trump was seated next to Ambassador Yuri Dubinin at a luncheon given by Leonard Lauder, who runs his mother's Estes Cosmetics business. Turns out that Dubinin's daughter knew all about the Trump Tower with a 6-foot-high atrium of apricot marble and blinding brass, where a $2 million, 80-foot-high waterfall sloshes down one wall. As Trump recounts the conversation in his 1987 book, one thing led to another, and now I'm talking about building a large luxury hotel across the street from the Kremlin. The plan was to build in partnership with the Soviet government. When visitors went to Russia, they received lavish hospitality in the hopes of the person committing something that could be used as blackmail. Once in Moscow, they received lavish hospitality. Everything is free. There are good parties with nice girls. It would be a sauna and girls and who knows what else. The hotel rooms or villa were under 24-hour control with security cameras and so on. The interest is only one, to collect some information and keep that information about him for the future. In January 1987, Trump was considered a prominent person, and Dubinin, along with Vitaly Churkin, a future UN ambassador, arranged for his trip to Moscow on July 4th. Really? You go to Soviet Russia on the 4th of July? Trump, along with his then wife Ivana, went to Moscow. 2 months after his trip to Russia, he takes out a full-page ad in the New York Times for almost $100,000, criticizing foreign policy, mostly complaining about NATO and trying to weaken it, a move that was in the best interest of Russia, something he still pushes for today. The day that he paid $94.8K for a full-page ad is also the day that he let people know he was considering running for president. This, so far, is all facts. However, the next part I'm going to talk about is all speculation. In Bob Woodward's book Fear, he said that him and Cohn were talking about jobs, and Cohn asked him about these views, and Trump said he had these views for 30 years. Considering that the book was published in 2008, the conversation happened probably in 2017. 30 years before this was Trump's visit to Russia. This means probably a large part of his beliefs come from things that would be good for Russia. Having a trade war with China and fighting with them over factory jobs and trying to attack NATO are all things that would play in Russia's best interest. But enough with the baseless speculation. Let's get back to the facts. Trump released that ad in the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the Boston Globe on September 2nd, 1987, months after he went to Russia. Basically, the ads said, "End our huge deficits, reduce our taxes, and let America's economy grow unencumbered by the costs of defending those who can easily afford to pay us for the defense of their freedom," something he still pushes for today. A month later, Trump went to a campaign speech with Mike Dunbar, a Republican operative that talked him into running for president. However, Trump began by telling people at the campaign speech that he wouldn't be running for president, which disappointed some, especially Dunbar. Then Trump wailed with no notes and for roughly the next half hour about Japan, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Washington, Wall Street, politicians, economists, and nice people, of whom he had enough, he said. This country is facing disaster and is being kicked around. Other countries are laughing at us. Themes he has been hawking ever since. His attack on Wall Street is definitely something Russia would have approved of, especially considering they're communist. And railing against foreign policy would be nothing but beneficial for the Russians, considering that it was in the middle of the Cold War. So, after that, there's a bit of a lull. Now, he doesn't have another tie with Russia until January 1989, when Trump entered a deal with the Soviet cycling team to allow them to participate in a cycling race that ended at the front door of Trump's Atlantic City casino. He sponsored them for 2 years. Then, in 1989, Trump announced a deal to stage a Soviet boxing match where two Toronto-based businessmen traveled to Moscow to try and make the deal happen. However, nothing ever came of the deal. So, again, there's a bit of a lull until 1996, when Trump started getting involved in Russia again. One of the first things he did was to start seeking out trademarks in Russia for company names. Between 1996 and 2008, Trump had filed for at least 8 trademark applications in Russia. Then, in November 1996, Trump traveled to Russia again to look for sites for a potential Trump Tower. He traveled with Howard Lorber, who was a president and CEO of Vector Groups, a holding company with various business interests in Russia. This trip was arranged by Bennett LeBow. Bennett LeBow and Howard Lorber are friends of Trump to this day. They have extensive ties to Russia with businesses owned by them in Russia. Lorber had also donated to Trump's 2016 election. So, 2 months after Trump's trip to Russia, again, a retired Russian general named Alexander L. Albed, who was planning on running for Russian president, met with Trump at Trump Tower for an hours-long meeting that was off-limits to the press, with Trump talking about how they plan to build something major in Russia. Later, in 1997, Trump made a deal with a Russian artist named Zurab Tsereteli to erect a giant statue of Christopher Columbus on the Hudson River. It was supposed to be 6 feet taller than the Statue of Liberty. This never actually happened. In 1999, Trump made public comments critical of Yeltsin and Russia, shortly after Yeltsin resigned and Putin took office. So, this is all the documented connections Trump has with Russia from 1983 to 1999 that I could find. I was thinking about doing a 3-part series documenting his connections with Russia, but again, I really don't care that much about Trump. He's, again, a terrible person, but I don't really care that much about his past. I care about what he's currently doing and how he's currently fucking over the United States. He obviously has heavy ties to Russia, and they seem to be coloring his actions, and I kind of just wanted to document some of his lesser-known ties. Well, thanks for listening, everyone, and have a great day.